Finally tonight, two men are running their way through Canada and upstate New York for an important cause. Thaddeus Meyer and Alexander Hall plan to run 1,000 miles in 25 days. Get that, to raise money for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. Obviously, we saw recent high-profile suicides. The run is in honor of Meyer's mother, who took her own life last year. He says her symptoms were hidden and now speaks of the importance of recognizing the signs of mental illness. They call the run SOS, which stands for See Our Symptoms.
We just want to start conversations and make sure people are talking. And no matter how hard this gets for us, we know other people are going through harder things.
Let's keep talking. Let's be the voice. Let's start those conversations. All right. It's okay to not be okay.
And Molly, I know this hits home for you. Thaddeus is a friend of yours.
Yes, this is something we've heard in the news, celebrities having this recent spate. This is something that hits all of us and our friends and our family, and this is a wonderful cause to see our symptoms. The SOS 1,000-mile run is a great thing to support.
Cool. The duo plans to finish that run June 19th in Albany, New York. Great cause. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. We put the interview with President Trump on the website, so you can check it out there in case you missed it. That is it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. We have complete coverage of the IG report out tomorrow. I'll be here in Washington with special guests and a panel. The story, hosted by Martha MacCallum, starts right now. Martha.
Welcome back. Good to see you, Brett. Thank you. And we begin tonight with an exclusive interview right off the top. South Carolina Representative Mark Sanford has never lost an election in his long career until last night. The Republicans not been shy when it has come to criticizing the president.
If he would just shut up, quit attacking. I don't work for him. I work for about 750,000 people here in the 1st Congressional District. One of the things I've heard in interviews about Trump is like he's not sorry for anything. I think that's a profound mistake.
So it's comments like that may have led to a stinging last-minute tweet from President Trump that went like this. Mark Sanford's been very unhelpful to me in my campaign to make America great again. He is MIA and nothing but trouble. He is better off in Argentina. I fully endorse Katie Arrington for Congress in South Carolina, a state I love. She's tough on crime. We'll continue to fight our fight to lower taxes. Vote Katie, said the president. Sanford's opponent, Katie Arrington, also went after him in ads like this.
I'm running for Congress to get things done, not to go on CNN to bash President Trump. But it's time for Mark Sanford to take a hike, for real this time.
So last night, before the final votes were counted, Mark Sanford was fearing the worst.
It's fairly unusual for a president to tweet in a congressional race. I'm neither for nor against Trump. I'm for ideas that I've long stood for over the entirety of my time in politics. It may have cost me an election in this case, but I stand by every one of those decisions.
And Sean Spicer will join us in just a moment on whether he thinks this is a lesson, perhaps, for other Republicans running in the midterms. But first, here exclusively tonight, we're very glad to have South Carolina Congressman Mark Sanford joining us. Congressman, welcome. It's good to have you here. Good evening to you. Obviously, last night was a rough night for you. You've had a very strong, long career in politics in South Carolina. Do you believe that President Trump cost you this election?
Well, I wouldn't say it was a tweet, but the race ultimately was reduced down to who was more Trump versus not, and I lost that race.
And do you say that as a warning to other candidates out there? Would you change anything about your campaign?
No, we always Monday afternoon quarterback campaigns, and there are things you could have done a little bit differently. That's the nature of life. But what I would say is this. The warning is for all of us, because if you look at my actual voting record, I've been with the president 89% of the time. So, 11% I've disagreed on. But I love my brothers and sisters. Doesn't mean I agree with them on 100% of the time. And so I think it's important for all of us to stop and say, wait a minute, we have an institution that was set up by the Founding Fathers where in vigorous dissent, disagreement was part of what they set up. They wanted it to be a legislative body, at times to be a check on the executive branch, and vice versa. And if we lose that, if simply the litmus test of our elections is who is 100% in allegiance with somebody else, I think we will have lost an awfully important part of what makes our country special and unique based on the Founding Fathers' design.
Do you think it was wrong for him to do that, to put that tweet out there, to get involved in the primary at that late moment?
It's America. Everybody's going to do what they're going to do, and the president certainly has his prerogative to do what he wants to do on that front. But again, the issue is, do we want to have litmus tests and allegiance tests in running for office? Or do we say, look, if you're with me 90% of the time, in essence, you're with me, and because I voted for every single agenda item that he has laid out.
But if that's the case, Congressman, shouldn't maybe the reverse is also true? If you're agreeing so much with the things that he's putting out there and you're voting with him 90% of the time, why go on TV and bash him if you feel like generally he's moving in the direction you want to go?
It's not a bash. I mean, this is what we have going right now. I went to business school at the University of Virginia, and they believed in the Socratic process where you threw an idea down the middle and you debated long enough, and hopefully the truth fell out at the bottom. And that is important. That's the American way. We can agree to disagree. And so I, for instance, voted against the omnibus bill. I think it was the right vote. The president himself has later said he won't sign any more like that. But to say I disagree with the omnibus vote ultimately is, again, a stand tied to issues and beliefs that I've long held, that are important to the constituents that I represent. I don't view it as something against the president, though it was certainly cast as such in this race.
This is what Senator Bob Corker said about Republicans and the party right now.
We're in a strange place. I mean, it's almost, it's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it? It's not a good place for any party to end up with a cult-like situation as it relates to a president that happens to be purportedly of the same party.
What do you think about that?
Well, it fits with what my opponent said last night. Her words were, this is the party of Donald J. Trump. I don't believe it's the party of Donald J. Trump. It is the party of the taxpayers of South Carolina and of Georgia and Florida and go across every state in this union. There are a lot of Republicans out there who've worked their souls out. They worked hard for years, stuffing envelopes and putting up yard signs and doing all the things that you do in politics. That's who the party belongs to. And this notion that anybody at the top, we are a nation of laws and not men, should somehow be the person that we're to be.
It sounds to me that you just don't like him personally, but you, most of the time, 90% of the time, you like what he's doing. So is it personal and for you? And is that necessarily wise? I mean, when you look at the economy, you look at the North Korea, you look across the board, does any part of you say, well, maybe I should have just, sort of not, maybe I should have kept my thoughts to myself about how I felt about him personally, because I'm on board with what he wants to do.
I would ask you to look at my record. I've never said anything about him personally. What I have disagreed with were certain stands that he took, and I think that is legitimate fair game in the world of politics.
It certainly is. Absolutely. Congressman, thank you very much. Is your career over in politics, as was written a lot today? Do you agree with that?
I've learned, believe me, I've learned never to say never, but that would certainly be my take. I mean, but it's been an honor to represent folks back home in South Carolina for a while now. I do think that this is a wake-up call, though, about the institutions of our country, about what we believe on that front, and ultimately a wake-up call with regard to the Republican Party, and does strong stands in terms of conservatism and tax policy and spending and those kinds of things matter more, or does allegiance matter more?
Would you and folks like Bob Corker consider splitting off and maybe running a candidate against the president in 2020?
No, I'm a day out of my election. I'm going to focus on making a living, all those basics of life. So you're getting way ahead of me, Martha.
Understood. All right, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
So here with more Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary. Sean, good evening. Good to see you tonight. What do you think about that? Mark Sanford's had a long career. He's never lost. Last night he did, and he doesn't seem to want to change really anything about it, he says.
Well, I understand that, but the fact of the matter is the people of the 1st District of South Carolina clearly believe that the president's fighting for them. They're interested in getting the results that they like, because when the president tweeted for Katie Arrington, they voted for her. And so I think that it was interesting because I think you were really hitting on an important point with the congressman, which is this. He talks about the fact that he voted with the president 89% on policy. So clearly, in a vast majority of the time, he agrees with him on the issues. What this came down to was style. He was attacking the president and the president's style. And the people of South Carolina, clearly by the numbers, believed that the president was fighting for them. So, you know, this isn't a question about disagreeing on policy, as he was making at the end, because he, by his own voting record, does agree with the president on most policies. What it comes down to is that it's a question of style and tone, because the president has been very clear about his willingness to fight for policies and issues and that he thinks are important to the American people. And the vote was clear that the people of South Carolina took Katie Arrington's position over Mark Sanford, who had represented this district for a long time, then went on and served as governor twice, and then come back and now served several terms there as the first district congressman again. So he's a well-known person there. I think clearly the people of South Carolina didn't like his approach to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed it was only a few thousand votes. I mean, in a primary, that's often the case, but you know, it would seem
well, but
that's go ahead.
That's true, but it's not. This isn't an open seat or against a freshman. Mark Sanford is a well-known institution throughout South Carolina. Never mind in the first district.
Point is well taken. What about Bob Corker? I mean, he's been a thorn in the side of President Trump a lot. Sometimes they seem to make up. Then he goes back at him. He says that what he sees in the Republican Party, which you have worked for long before you worked for the president, it has become a cult, essentially, a cult of Trump. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, in any party that controls the White House, the president's the dominant figure in that policy. That's true going back all throughout modern history. So this is no exception. But the reality isn't what Senator Corker and Congressman Sanford, to some degree, and I say this very respectfully, forget, is that it's not like the president's just saying something and nothing's happening. The people of whether it's Tennessee or South Carolina, or we saw this with Senator Flake in Arizona and others, where the people are actually agreeing with the president's comments and tactics and strategy and his fight. So it's not like he's just attacking it and it's going into the blue. The president's doing this and it's resonating with them. And the people, especially at the base of the Republican Party, believe that the president is fighting for them. And they are tired of the happy talk and the talking points and the excuses. And they like the president's results.
I know that you have a book that's about to come out. There's a quote that from the book. You said, you were asked, actually, in an interview in Rolling Stone, if you miss it. And you said no. It's unbelievably intense, lonely job as press secretary. And it strikes me that you were there in the beginning. So now that you look at, the accomplishments that have happened since you left, there must have been moments when you thought to yourself, is this gonna work, this whole thing?
Which whole thing? The beginning?
The presidency. When you were there in the beginning, were there moments when you wondered if you would see the accomplishments that you've seen over the course of the past 500 days?
Well, look, let me go back a second, because the quote was partial. The beginning part of that quote that they didn't put down was that I said I was very honored to serve both the president and the American people. And I think Sarah's doing a fantastic job. And that being said, I miss the people. I miss the interaction, but the intensity I don't miss. It is a truly intense and sometimes lonely position. But I was honored to have it. And I thank the president, Mrs. Trump, the vice president, for giving me that opportunity. That being said, at the beginning, this president and continues to be an absolute disruptor. A lot of people still haven't gotten the message. But I think when you look back, and you were kind of commenting to some degree with Congressman Sanford, the degree to which he's achieved results, whether it's in the economy for the American workers, whether it's in trade policy, whether it's in foreign policy, all of this is stuff those are the results. So I don't think any of us could have predicted how much he's getting done.
Later tonight, I'm going to talk to two families who've wanted the remains of their loved ones returned from Korea for decades. They've been fighting the U.S. government, trying to get information, and now for the first time after the meeting, they feel like there's hope that they're actually going to get some closure and some resolution in this really emotional part of their lives, which is understandable. Sean, thank you so much.
You know what?
Great to see you. Yeah, go ahead.
Quickly.
Martha, you may be the only person, and Fox may be the only network that covers that. Thank you for doing that, because the other networks, the other media has ignored that huge accomplishment of the president. So thank you for covering that important aspect of news that has gotten so overlooked.
Well, you know what? They're going to speak in their own voices, and everybody at home will hear them. And I think it is a very important story. Sean, thank you very much. Good to see you as always.
Thank you.
So did Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein threaten Intelligence Committee staffers who were asking him questions about getting somewhere with the Russia probe? Congressman Pete King sits on the Intel Committee, and he is here tonight with his reaction to this very hot story right now. Plus, the indicted Capitol Hill staffer and his girlfriend and her story about Carter Page, who joins us with his thoughts. And as I mentioned, President Trump says that these families wanted to hear for decades about the remains of their fallen family members, their loved ones who were in the war in Korea. And now there may be resolution, finally, for them. Royale described by one participant as a screaming match at times in these meetings between Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and members of the House Intel Committee. Fox News has obtained emails showing House staffers at one specific meeting were left feeling chilled by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein after his apparent angry tirade over questions that they were asking about the Russia investigation and documents that they wanted. House sources say that he even threatened to subpoena their calls and emails. Congressional Republicans slamming those actions.
The head of the Justice Department, Rod Rosenstein, was threatening members of the House Intelligence Committee for doing their job.
If you don't believe that the Department of Justice was off the rails, you're clearly not looking at the same Department of Justice I'm looking at.
But critics say that this is all the tactics of the Intel Committee's Republican chairman, Devin Nunes.
I know the reputation of Devin Nunes, and that is one of misleading, obstructing, attempting to intervene in an investigation.
The president's allies in the House of Representatives, starting with Devin Nunes, are doing the president's bidding.
Congressman Peter King sits on the committee that is at the center of all this, and he joins me now. Congressman King, thank you very much for being with us. You know, these meetings have just been described as contentious often, not just in this one instance. Is this a heated room much of the time?
You know, generally the only person on the committee who meets with Rosenstein is Devin Nunes and sometimes Trey Gowdy. Staff members are there often, but Devin always reports back to us, the staff people do, and certainly this is the account that they gave, that when they were trying to get information, which we're entitled to, by the way, it was Congress that created the Department of Justice. We're the ones who oversee them, and they have to provide us information. And for whatever reason, Rosenstein has refused to do it. And that at one of these meetings in particular, it got very heated, and he basically threatened staff, threatening to subpoena their emails, I guess their text messages, their phone logs, which really has nothing to do at all with the fact that we are legitimately asking for information. So that was clearly a threat and an abuse of power, and it makes you wonder, what are they trying to hide?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Andy McCarthy wrote a piece in the National Review about this today, and he said the House Intel Committee is investigating whether the government has used the Justice Department's awesome investigative authorities as a weapon against political adversaries. And he says that this tells him that what's happening is that the Justice Department is threatening to use their awesome investigative authorities as a weapon against political adversaries. Is that where you see it?
Yeah, unwittingly, they are proving our point that they do abuse their power and that they have gone well beyond their lane. And also, I would say on this, it's important to point out that Rod Rosenstein, and I have nothing against him personally, but I think he's acted very wrong here. He is the one who signed the fourth FISA application. He's the one who signed on to that, and there are real questions about what was contained in that application. So in a way, he is also being investigated himself. And I think he should be recusing himself from this entire matter. But in any event, so he has a double motive here. Not only is he somehow digging in to protect the institution against Congress, but he also has himself being in that fourth FISA application, which he's signed on to. And we believe there are irregularities in that application.
How do you see this all being resolved?
I think ultimately the president may have to come in here. I mean, this is
and do what?
basically order them. I mean, he does control the Justice Department. He can give them very legitimate orders. Turn this over to Congress. Comply with the Constitution. Do what you have to do. If not, if it does have to go to the House, and there is
It's like he has had a divide with his attorneys, and there's a lot of speculation that he may be about to flip on the president. What do you think about it?
Well,
what's
first
your
of all, I would say no, because as far as flipping, you have to have information to give. And as far as I know, from everything I've seen throughout this entire investigation, there is nothing that Michael Cohen would have on the president. And also, I don't think he's the type of person to make something up for the purpose of getting himself off. And so far, I'm not aware of any real evidence against Michael Cohen, unless they're going after him for everything that he possibly could have even thought of doing over the years. So again, I just think that Michael Cohen, right now, these are, as far as I'm concerned, just more rumors coming out.
All right, 3.7 million documents that they're trying to get through by Friday, and now he has apparently separated from his attorneys. It's going to make that task pretty tough. Thank you so much, Congressman Peter King.
Martha, thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you here, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So coming up, the thaw with North Korea is giving hope to families of missing Korean War veterans. We will speak with two people who hope that their heroes' remains will finally be brought home. And the reporter and the Capitol Hill staffer, their love affair, the not guilty plea that happened today, real journalism, and Carter Page, who was the subject of that leak, coming up next. Decades on Capitol Hill as a staffer on the Senate Intel Committee. Today, he pled not guilty in federal court. The former head of security for the committee had all kinds of access, and now he is charged with lying to the investigators about his contacts with reporters, including his then-girlfriend, Allie Watkins. Trace Gallagher is in our West Coast newsroom with the backstory on this one tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. As security for the Senate Intel Committee, James Wolf's primary job was to protect classified information. So during the FBI's ongoing probe into criminal leaks of classified information to the media, Wolf was naturally asked about his contacts with reporters, and apparently he failed to mention his 3-year affair with reporter Allie Watkins. The relationship began when Watkins was an intern for a D.C. news organization in 2013. In 2014, Watkins was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for her coverage of the Senate Intel Committee's report on CIA torture. Watkins attributed her knack for uncovering hidden details to, quote, showing up at odd hours when no one else is showing up. Or maybe no one else was invited. The indictment says Wolf and Watkins exchanged tens of thousands of electronic communications. For example, in March of 2017, after James Wolf received a classified document related to former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, he and Watkins exchanged 82 text messages and had a 28-minute phone conversation. Days later, Watkins posted an article on BuzzFeed confirming that Carter Page met with a Russian intel official in 2013. The liberal media then gushed. Watch.
Congratulations on this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was
Thanks for having
fun to follow in your footsteps as we saw what you reported here. It's incredible stuff. Allie Watkins, national security correspondent for BuzzFeed News.
Well, Carter Page wasn't nearly as impressed, though he is now enlightened, tweeting, quote, it had long been a mystery to me how MSNBC always miraculously knew about was well staked out from my Hart Senate office building visits, despite my best attempts to stay undercover. I guess all these things are now becoming more understandable. The inside information eventually led Watkins to jobs at Politico and now the New York Times, both of which reportedly knew about the affair, though the Times is now reviewing her work history. And now James Wolf's attorneys are filing a motion to limit public officials, including President Trump, from commenting on the case. Trump has already tweeted that Wolf leaked classified information. Wolf's lawyers deny that he did.
And
Martha.
he pled not guilty today. Trace, thank you very much. My next guest has been closely following this case. Michael Goodwin is New York Post columnist and a Fox News contributor. Michael, good to have you here. You quote Abe Rosenthal in your piece from the New York Times, who had a way of dealing with reporters who didn't understand that this kind of thing presents a conflict of interest.
Right. Yes, I was a young reporter. Legendary Abe Rosenthal was the editor in the 80s, and he had a remarkably similar case case to this where a young woman had been hired by the Times. A story came out that where she worked in Philadelphia, she had an affair with a politician she had written about, accepted all kinds of gifts from him. And he said to her, is the story true? She said, yes. He said, clean out your desk. You'll never work here again. And some reporters came to complain, oh, you're being too harsh. And he said, look, you can screw elephants if you want on your own time, but then you can't cover the circus for the paper.
I mean, yes.
Your private conduct is fine, but when it impacts the credibility of the newspaper, then you have a conflict, and the paper has to come first. And so he fired that woman. But the New York Times hired this woman, Allie Watkins, despite knowing she had had a romantic relationship with a source at her previous position.
And then they continued to let her cover the Intel Committee.
Yes, and once she gets to the Times, she withholds from them the fact that she has been contacted by the FBI in February of this year and told that they have seized her phone records. So she doesn't tell the New York Times that she's actually involved in a criminal investigation.
Yeah, and then, we saw her with Rachel Maddow, giving her all kinds of praise and telling her that she had, how fun it is to follow in your footsteps, which may be a little more fun than people realized at the time. But here's something that she was tweeting. Senate Intel has been so frustrated in recent weeks by the constant dribble of leaks about who's testifying to them and when. And then she went on to say the SSCI, the committee, read is that Trumpster lawyers will leak info about upcoming appearances, blame the committee, and then use as a pretext not to cooperate. So in that one, she is suggesting that the leaks are coming from the Trump folks and not from the Intel Committee. That might have been true, but boy, that's going to be tough to convince people at this point.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, given the charges against Wolf, her former lover, it looks to me in that tweet as though she's creating disinformation to steer people away from suspecting Wolf as being the source of the leaks and toward the White House. I mean, if she did that, now the Times says it's going to investigate her work. These are the sorts of things that I believe if they can get to the truth, she will not be there much longer.
I mean, I think most reporters out there are, kind of like, wow, the rest of us are making phone calls and taking notes on our notepads. And it makes it a little bit difficult when you've got people with these kind of relationships. Where are the Abe Rosenthal's of today? Who walks into the newsroom and goes, that's not how it works. You can do whatever you want on your own time, but you can't cover that story.
Look, there has been a complete collapse of standards in the mainstream media. I mean, now it's about hating Donald Trump. If you hate Donald Trump, that's enough to get you hired in most of these places. I mean, nothing else matters. That is the litmus test, unfortunately. And I hope the Times will do the right thing here, look carefully at everything she has done. And I believe they will conclude that she has not been honest, that she has not been a legitimate reporter, but in fact was sleeping with her main source.
Thank you very much. Michael Goodwin, always good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Martha.
And as Trace reported, in April of 2017, Allie Watkins wrote a story claiming that my next guest met with and passed documents to a Russian intel operative. Joining me now exclusively, Carter Page, former advisor to Donald Trump's presidential campaign and managing partner at Global Energy Capital LLC. Did you tell Allie Watkins that you were man number one in the FBI investigation?
Well, it's funny, Martha, in that little clip you had on Rachel Maddow's show, she's saying that I admitted it. She, in our meeting, right before that story came out, she says, I'm about to report this. I have confirmation from various sources in Washington, obviously without explaining who the sources are. And, this is coming out. And really, going back to the whole masking element, it's pretty clear that, anyone that knows much about me, there's not many people that could have referred to in that indictment. So, I didn't really confirm per se, but it's sort of.
She said, oh, it was easy. He just, admitted it right off the bat. But you think that she was getting that confirmation from her other source. How do you think that James Wolf was involved in all of this? Because you were working with him, I'm coming in on Tuesday, I'm going to be testifying, thinking that the head of security for this committee is going to be someone that you could trust, I would imagine.
The sad part about it is, Martha, I was objecting to both Chairman Burr, but also Senator Warner and the whole committee staff, that these various leaks are coming out. And you cited the MSNBC report where there was a stakeout and they're waiting for me. And I knew that was coming. And the sad part about it is, I've suffered from various death threats going back, over, a couple years now. And it was they had sort of died down a little bit. But when this false spin starts coming out about, subpoenas, et cetera, it continued again. And I specifically mentioned this to them. And, not much interest, and sort of this media buzz approach that they've been taking just continued and continued.
Well, it was a buzzsaw that you got caught up in as well. Carter Page, thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight.
Martha.
Interesting, right? All right, so still to come this evening, what should happen to the fraternity brothers charged in the hazing death of Penn State sophomore Tim Piazza? Tonight, a small sliver of justice for his family. We're going to bring you that story. And the relatives of Korean War vets killed in the line of duty, waiting for decades, trying with every bone in their body to get information out of the government about their lost loved ones. Now it looks like they may get resolution thanks to the deal that we saw in Singapore. They will be here in a moment to tell you why this was such an important development.
But one of the things that really I'm happy is that the soldiers that died in Korea, their remains are going to be coming back home. We had pretty much finished, and I said, would you do me a favor? The remains of these great fallen heroes, could we do something? He agreed to it immediately.
President Trump providing new hope to families of veterans who have been waiting for more than 60 years for their loved ones to be returned from the Korean War. More than 7,700 American troops are still unaccounted for. My next two guests have been fighting for most of their lives for the return of their family members. First Lieutenant Robert Schmidt pushed through injuries to fight in one of the bloodiest battles of the Korean War and was killed in action. John Henry Zimmerly is an Air Force captain who went out on a night's mission in Korea on 1952 in his plane with 4 others and never returned. Joan Morris is the niece of First Lieutenant Robert Schmidt, who she knows as Uncle Bobby, and John Zimmerly is the son of Captain John Henry Zimmerly. Thank you so much to both of you for being with us today. Joan, I know this has been such a huge part of your life, committed to bringing him home, your Uncle Bobby. What would this mean to you if you could do that?
It would mean closure for our family. In particular, it would mean that we have completed something that our grandmother always wanted us to do, and that was to bring our Uncle Bobby home to North Dakota. So we are very encouraged by what's happening with President Trump, and it would mean the world to us to have him home.
There was a headline in the AP after the summit, John, and this is what it read: Trump retreats from U.S. moral leadership stance. Given where you're coming from in all of this, do you think that's true?
Yes, I think it's true, but I think in our particular case, this is the first motion, the first meeting, and it's getting an amazing amount of attention, and we expect an amazing amount of information from it.
I know you have been very frustrated with the government over all of these years because, you learn about the thousands of the remains that are in Hawaii somewhere. And I know none of you know the whereabouts of these remains. And you've spent so much of your life, John, working on this. So tell me about how you feel about it and whether or not, what you think about what the president said in that soundbite in the beginning.
Well, we're amazed. This is only the second president in history that has ever given our case any attention at all, and we're absolutely delighted. We think it's the first step in making a lot of headway towards finding information about our loved ones. The remains that they want to bring back to us will identify a number of individuals, and some of those individuals would have maybe not known to be killed in action, may just be MIA, like my father's case. We're simply missing him. We don't know if he died in the battlefield, if he was a POW, or just what happened. So by doing DNA analysis on all of these remains, we will be able to uncover good information on a number of these cases. For instance, if any of my father's crew wound up being identified, then we would assume that the plane did crash and probably all of them died. Right now, we don't know what happened.
I mean, it must be so hard living with that, John, all these years.
It certainly is. Well, as a young person, 4 and 5 years old, the The military told my family, myself and my mother, that if they found anything, they were continually looking for it. If they find anything at all, that they would notify us immediately. Well, I was the person in the family that went to the mailbox every day looking for that information and never received it. In 1995, they sent me a postcard saying that they're willing now to look into these cases. And so I flew up to D.C. to meet with the new department, and I was not exactly pleased with what they intended to do, so I started doing my own research in 1995.
Yeah. And I know it's been extensive. Joan, you know, in terms of your reaction to what you saw play out in this summit that we watched over the last 48 hours, what was going through your mind, given your family's own connection to this war?
Well, a lot of people see.
I'm sorry, that was for Joan. Thank you. Go ahead, Joan. Joan and John.
We were just so grateful that President Trump took the time during this important summit to address the fact that there are so many missing soldiers from the Korean War. It was very heartwarming to see that there was a care there for getting our soldiers back home.
Yeah, they call it the forgotten war, and it is not forgotten in your families. And you carry the memories of these individuals, and you look at the pictures that we just did, full of spirit and full of life, these young men who lost their lives. So we would love to follow your story, and we would love you to keep in touch with us and let us know if you're satisfied with the follow-through here, because if you're not, we want to know that too, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
John and Joan, thank you so much. Great to see both of you tonight. So you remember this story. It took 11 hours for somebody to finally call 911 after Penn State student Timothy Piazza fell down a flight of stairs in a horrific alcohol hazing incident. Today, the Piazza family has some news, though. They got a little bit of justice in Tim's death. Thomas Klein, who has been with us before, is back tonight to tell us what happened today.
We have a friend who's unconscious. He hasn't moved. He's cold extremity. It's probably an ambulance.
Okay, how old is he?
He is 19? Yeah, 19 years old.
Mr. Burke accepts full responsibility for his involvement in this tragic event. There are too few words to describe a loss so great. This young man understands that.
Tonight, the first admission of guilt in the death of Timothy Piazza, the Penn State student whose life ended tragically in February of 2017 in a fraternity hazing incident gone horribly wrong. Ryan Burke, one of Tim's so-called brothers, pled guilty to 9 charges in Piazza's death. More than 24 others still face charges and have not stepped forward to do what this young man did today. Surveillance video shows Burke giving Piazza a handle of vodka to drink, one of 18 drinks that he consumed in 82 minutes. He later fell down a flight of basement stairs. He became unconscious, and he died when no one called 911 for 11 hours. Joining me now exclusively is Thomas Klein, the attorney for the Piazza family. Thomas, welcome. Good to have you with us tonight. So this is the first individual to step up and take any form of responsibility for what happened, right?
That's correct. This is the first individual who has stepped up and said that he is responsible. He has actually pled guilty to 8 counts, actually 9 counts.
So that includes hazing. What else did he plead guilty to, and what kind of potential punishment will be attached?
Sure. He pled guilty to 4 counts of hazing, 4 counts of serving alcoholic beverages, and 1 count of consumption. He actually was under the age himself. He was 20 years old. But here's the really important part of it. This took place, his conduct took place in the so-called social, which was actually an extension of hazing. And it was actually caught on the basement video, which of course there was an attempt to try to conceal it. So we have evidence that they attempted to try to conceal, which proved his guilt, and he admitted guilt to something which is being contested by all the other defendants. It's a very important day.
Yeah. So what's the impact on the other cases?
Well, we are hopeful that his steps will be followed. We are very hopeful, and I spoke with Jim Piazza just before I came on your show. We are all hopeful that there will be others who will follow suit. We hope that this will inform these brothers that they should come forward, that they should accept their complicity in what was collectively a horrible event which led to Tim Piazza's catastrophic injury and then to his death. We hope that they will come forward. Mr. Burke has done the right thing here.
So this, the sentencing will be July 31st, and that's going to be the first opportunity that the Piazzas, who have spoken here on our show many times, and our thoughts are with them as we go through this process, they'll be able to make a victim statement there, correct? Will they do that?
That's correct. Jim and Evelyn Piazza, Tim Piazza's courageous parents, crusaders on behalf of not only justice for Tim, but against hazing and abuse on college campuses. They will be heard now for the first time in a victim impact statement. That also will be a banner and a very important day.
What are the sort of strongest charges that remain for the other members of the fraternity? And do you think that ultimately anybody will do time? What kind of punishment do you think is possible here?
Well, punishment is, of course, an important part of deterrence, and there are many individuals facing many years in jail. The Attorney General has been steadfast in trying to reinstate the charges of involuntary manslaughter. There currently are charges of reckless endangerment as well as hazing against many individuals. Yeah. Mr. Burke himself faces 8 counts that each carry with it potentially a year in jail. And of course, you have that multiplied by many individuals. Yeah. So there are serious charges with serious potential jail time. We are hopeful not that people go to jail for the sake of going to jail, but rather for the sake of being a deterrent from this happening in the future.
Absolutely. And this is something that young men and women, because this happens in sororities too, across the country need to pay attention to. They should be talking about it in their meetings on campus about this so that it doesn't happen to another beautiful young life like Tim Piazza and his family.
I agree. And Martha, I might add that in Pennsylvania, we are moving forward with the anti-hazing bill, and that's going to help as well.
I'm glad to hear it. Thomas Klein, thank you very much. Quote of the night is up next.